It begins with a rumor. A freighter spotted something in the early morning fog, metal, drifting, silent, bow half submerged, no lights. The crew altered course to avoid it. No one boarded, no one reported it. There was no need. The sea has its ghosts. Everyone knows that. But this one was different. This one had a name. The Lyubov Orlova, a Soviet-built cruise ship, 295 feet of steel and glass, designed to cut through the cold. In her prime, she carried tourists through the Arctic and Antarctic, places where the air turns to needles and the sun forgets to rise. She'd seen whales breach beside her hull and icebergs taller than cities pass in the night. Her decks echoed with laughter once. Her staterooms were lined with maps and fur-lined gloves and the smell of vodka and old paper. But that was a long time ago. By the early 2000s, the Lyubov Orlova had changed hands more times than anyone could track. The tours slowed, the money dried up, her paint chipped, the carpets molded, and in 2010, after a crew went unpaid and a lawsuit went unanswered, she was seized by the port of St. John's, Newfoundland, and there she stayed. For over 2 years, the Lyubov Orlova sat moored to the dock, tilting slightly, rust curling around her nameplate like a shadow creeping up the walls. Birds nested in the lifeboats, the windows fogged from within. Locals said she creaked at night even when the wind was still. In early 2013, she was sold for scrap to a company in the Dominican Republic. The plan was simple: tow her to a breaker yard and tear her down to bolts and bones. A tugboat, the Charlene Hunt, was assigned to drag her south. It should have been over in weeks. Instead, it took only 1 day for the Atlantic to take her back. On January 23, 2013, somewhere off the coast of Newfoundland, the tow line snapped. The Lyubov Orlova drifted loose into the fog. There was no one aboard, no engines running, no lights, just a floating husk, cold, empty, and moving fast. Attempts were made to resecure her. They failed. The sea was rough, and the tug wasn't strong enough to get close. Transport Canada issued a statement days later. The ship had drifted beyond their jurisdiction. It was, they said, no longer their concern. They assumed it would sink. But it didn't. 2 weeks later, a satellite picked up a signal. One of the emergency beacons aboard the Lyubov Orlova had been triggered. Not manually, but automatically, when water reached the lower compartments. That meant she was still afloat. Damaged maybe, but alive. And then, nothing. No more beacons, no more sightings, no wreckage, no trace. She was gone. And that's when the stories started. The headlines were shameless. "Ghost ship of cannibal rats bound for Britain," splashed across British tabloids. But the whispers began first in quieter places. Maritime circles, shipping forums, late-night call-in shows. According to a British salvage expert, it was possible, perhaps even likely, that the Lyubov Orlova was still out there, drifting, slow, silent, with no crew, no passengers, and nothing to eat, except rats. It sounded absurd, sensational, but the logic was simple. Ships attract vermin, always have. A vessel that had sat idle for years would have become home to generations of rodents, and once the food ran out, instinct would do the rest. The ship would become a floating ecosystem, a sealed biosphere of desperation and teeth. No one ever found her, no one ever confirmed it, but no one ever disproved it either. There were sightings, barely reported. A freighter off the Azores saw something massive in the distance, but never went closer. A cruise ship captain swore they passed a liner in the fog that wasn't on radar. One fishing crew in Iceland said they heard a ship's bell ringing at dawn, echoing over open water. But they were all rumors, sea stories, and the sea has a long memory for those. What we do know is this: no wreckage was ever recovered, no flares spotted, no distress calls logged, no final signal, just a ship that vanished into one of the most violent, uncharted stretches of water on Earth. It's possible she sank. It's even likely. But the thing about the Atlantic is this: when it takes something, it usually leaves a trace. An oil slick, a lifeboat, a body, a name on the waves. And the Lyubov Orlova left nothing. No splash, no stain, no sound, only the possibility that she's still out there, adrift, hollow, moving only with the current. A machine without a mind, carried by tides and storms, creaking in the wind, hull stripped bare, windows broken, decks crawling with life that should have died long ago. Not haunted, just forgotten. And maybe that's worse. Thank you for listening to the Sunken Ledger. Subscribe for more true tales from the depths.